Day 3 of the Town of Bristol Budget Workshop. It is Wednesday, March 17th. Happy St. Patrick's Day, everyone. Rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thanks, everyone. Can we do a little jig now? What's that? Next.
Step dance.
I could do a jig, it just wouldn't be a good one, that's all. So we are doing an excellent job trudging through all of that is important. Some great feedback, some great conversation thus far. We're going to get right into it again. Our first agenda item this evening is 406, which is the Board of Canvassers. 406.
Okay, so this one I think is pretty easy. There's really no changes except I reduced the election salaries because we don't have any elections this year, or the election supplies or the maintenance. So the only thing that's there is really the salaries and payroll taxes.
So decrease this year on our budget line shows 91.7% decrease.
Correct.
I think that will win the award for
You think
the
so? I like
largest
that.
decrease.
I want the gold star.
All right.
I do want to make one quick mention too, is we did receive 2 grants for the elections this year, one in the amount of $9,232.50, which were used for the screens, the sneeze guards for COVID during elections. And then we also received at this last election, the referendum, 4,958. So you should be able to see that going back into some of the funds going back into general funds.
Nice.
Oh, good song.
It's tough not to sing. I'm sorry. It's really tough
Right
not
on
to sing.
cue, right on cue.
Yeah, it really is. Any questions on 406?
Not for me.
I'd be surprised. So, okay, so we're going to go next to, just for the record, we've gone through municipal observances, which is 806. Next on the agenda is 405, which is boards and commissions. So we can go to 405. In my understanding, talking to the administrator a little bit earlier today, I don't believe there was anyone that was going to be on 4 boards or from the boards and commissions, at least as they are here, not because they don't care, quite the opposite. They've seen the numbers and there was no conversation. Mr. Administrator, is that correct? There was no objection or concern or anything else expressed?
That's right. They were informed that they were all level funded.
Perfect. Okay. I'm going to stop and say, what questions does this council have?
So the East Burial Ground, just because this other money over the years has been in for things like the fencing and repairs.
Yeah,
Is that why it's zeroed out right now? Because it's not a project?
Yeah, it's not a project. We did call the director or Charlie Cavalcanti, the chair of the board, and while we were doing the budget, and he had no recommendations for this year, so it doesn't sound like that's a project right now.
Okay.
As far as the traditional allotment to the cemetery commission for East Burial Ground, the grass cutting is now taken out of the landscape contract through DPW, so it's not a separate line.
Thank you.
Thank you. Anything else on boards and commissions 405? Okay. Next is 704, which is our fire. 704. Welcome, Chief.
Thank you.
I'm going to say to the guy who knows it, it is okay to remove your mask. In fact, we prefer it as you are responding to questions, and to everyone here, of course, we are spaced accordingly and correctly. But as you're speaking, please remove your mask. It makes it easier for everybody to hear. And it actually kind of draws attention if you're watching online or actually here to make it more focused. So Chief, as we've done in the past, or actually say in the last couple of days, is if you could bring to our attention anything that you'd like us to focus on, whether it's increase, decrease, and we're not going to go through each line item because we've all had the opportunity to do that already. Just point out what you'd like us to take a look at. Once that's done, I'm going to open it up to questions to the council.
Sounds good. I will start with a brief overview before the questions. But essentially we made some adjustments both up and down, some of the lines to come into a 3-year average spending trend. So we made some of those adjustments. Probably the increase to the EMS funding is probably something that gets everyone's attention, but it is a necessity. Fortunately, I'm pretty confident that the revenues will offset any of those expenses as well as some grant opportunities, which everybody knows I like grants. So they are very helpful in offsetting a lot of the expenses. So with that, I did have one good piece of news. I just wanted to take the opportunity to let everybody know effective March 1st, our ISO rating, which is the insurance services organization that kind of does an evaluation of the fire services within the community, upgraded our ratings from a 4 to a 3. So hopefully that is reflected in insurance premiums, because that's what the insurance companies use to kind of set the rates for both residential and commercial properties. So hopefully our businesses and residents will benefit a little bit from that.
Chief, give us perspective on that. So going from a 4 to a 3, how could you give it? Can you give us a comparison?
Sure.
Understanding how quality that is.
Yep, so they look at the water, there's really kind of 3 main fundamental things. They look at the fire department operations, they look at the water supply, and they look at the communications, such as how we receive 911 calls and how the dispatch is staffed and stuff like that. So when they looked at it this time, there were improvements kind of across the board that attributed to the score getting up high enough to bump us up a rating.
Okay, thank you. Congratulations too.
That's it.
That's all you got?
That's all I got.
Well, I'm going to take a moment for all of us and say thank you. Thank you, not only for the things that you would do on a normal time when it isn't before time and after time and current time, it's a strange time, but the efforts that you've personally put in and through the administrator and the people that work with you and for you, outstanding job working along with the police department, working along with volunteers. In fact, the harbor master, I forgot it was, I don't know if it was the chief that had commended him for his time that he had volunteered, but he's a great example of a multitude of town employees that have volunteered their time, and this council appreciates it, and we speak for the town, and the town appreciates it. So outstanding job and all that, but you personally have put an immense amount of effort and time in. And I know that, and I talk with the administrator all the time, and he speaks extremely highly of the efforts that you put in. And I want the public to hear that. And I know that my colleagues feel exactly the same way. Outstanding. So nice job.
Thank you for that. And you're welcome. It's what I signed up to do, so maybe not quite this level. But I'd be remiss if I didn't give credit to both the men and women of the fire department who, volunteered to begin with and now stepped up and volunteered in even more extreme circumstances, as well as everybody in the town, starting with yourselves, the elected officials, every department, no matter what I asked for, they didn't hesitate, they chipped in, whether it was manpower, whether it was equipment, whether it was pretty much anything. Just somebody to talk to for 5 minutes that didn't have anything to do with COVID-19. So it really was a community effort. And it even extended to people that reached out and wanted to volunteer, whether it was at the testing clinic on downtown beach, whether it's at the vaccination clinic, whether it was calling people, getting lunches out back in the spring when we were doing that, and getting a lot of the food out to some of the seniors and checking on them. So it's really been a community effort, as I think it's been, kind of worldwide, but nobody does it better than we do. And,
To that end, I, as we probably all do, talk with a lot of people from the state, and the state has recognized multiple times the tremendous efforts that Bristol is doing. We were speaking with the director of DPW yesterday, and he had talked many times, and his words were "we" many times, and he wasn't the only one that did that. And I know you just did that, and we feel the same way, right? That's the word. It's that it's not just you, but you deserve particular praise But there are so many people in this community that give back, and they do it when they know that nobody's watching. They're doing it for good reasons, not to get a pat on the back. And I think that's why it's even more important to give you a pat on the back, because outstanding job. So
Thank you again.
I'd like to open it up to the council for questions and comments, please.
If you don't mind,
Please.
I'll go
Of course.
first, Mr. Chairman. Certainly, I know folks in the other end of the world in Compton certainly praise a lot about how how fluent and how efficient the pod ran, and obviously coming here and actually examining and observing as to how it operated to open up the one in Tiverton that serviced Compton and Tiverton. And let me tell you, they complimented us there, but it's not because of what we're doing, is for how we learned and what we carried on. So it's much appreciated, the initiative that was taken here, and our community, Bristol, stepping forward to serve as a regional pod, especially for our first responders. So thank you.
Thank you. You're welcome. You're very welcome.
To the
And we have
administrator for also stepping up and
Well put,
supporting
Tony.
that as well.
Absolutely correct.
I'll jump in this too.
Please.
Hey, Chief, good to see you in person. So I'm going to jump right into the ongoing theme in this budget is software and licenses. If we could just talk about that, I think it's the ongoing budget.
Yeah, this is primarily some corrections. I think when we had gone to the service-wide agreement a couple of years ago, I think we probably carved a little too much out of that. My budget at that time, I think that at that time it was up around the 15,000. So what we've done is we've seen the software, like anything in life, the software fees tend to rise as time goes on. So we tried again to classify things in the right line item. So we kind of clean that up a little bit, and that's why you're seeing an increase this year there.
And you just mentioned fees are rising. Is it because of the contract that we got into, or is it because it's just, we knew that up front? I'm
Yeah,
just trying to
some of
see,
it's-
do we need to get out of it, or do we need to switch to other software, or?
No, I think one of
control
the
those
things we did
costs.
is we did switch out of one of the older softwares, so we did
Yep.
reduce that and just kind of went to a set fee where I don't have to worry about infrastructure upgrades. It's kind of handled cloud-based in the 21st century. So we've had some cost savings on that side of it. So I think a lot of this was really just clean up, like kind of declassifying things that should be getting paid out of this line that might have been getting paid out of a different line.
Oh, okay.
So we wanted to have that transparency correct and have it charged to the correct account. So we just cleaned some of that up. That's something I monitor quite a bit. I mean, there's always slight fee increases. Some of them are user-based, how many users, and they go up and down throughout the year with our system.
Of course,
But
because you
a
pay
lot of
for a
it is fixed.
license, do you pay for user licenses? Or?
Yeah, so some of the scheduling software that we use for
Okay.
the volunteers to schedule for EMS,
Yep.
it's by how many people.
Yep.
So that fluctuates for us in the course of the year, so it might go up a few hundred, might go down a few hundred, based on the membership, so that's pretty consistent, though it's not a huge jump one way or the other.
So we're seeing some reconciliation, it sounds like, some upgrades, and there, which is aligning with where we're seeing a little bit of an overage.
Yeah, I think we're in a good place with the suggested funding if we get to that.
Great, and I just had two other questions. How's the volunteerism going? The taxes, the incentive for the volunteer firemen. And then number three, the trucks. How are we doing with that?
Yeah, so the people have stepped up this year. In a year where it was very easy to kind of disappear and fall by the wayside, people really stepped up. So the volunteerism has been very good. In fact, I just got another application submitted through our online
Excellent.
application process today. So that's been pretty consistent. So that's been working out pretty well for us. The incentive stipend is kind of holding the line where we thought it would. So that's been going fine. Yeah, we're always open to those people that want to volunteer and learn a little bit about EMS and fire.
Good news there.
As far as the apparatus, we're in pretty good shape. Last year we had ordered a new engine 2 down the Thames Street station. So that is actually hopefully by the 4th of July, and maybe a little bit sooner. We'll be in town, so that'll again be good for us. That plays into that ISO rating that I talk about. They look at that, age of equipment and stuff like that. And And that'll be replacing a almost 30-year-old vehicle. So,
Oh, well. So well overdue there.
yeah, I mean, it's about what we get out of the truck. It's, you get about 20 to 25 as a frontline piece of apparatus, and then, we say hang on to it for 4 or 5 more years, 6 years, depending on the truck. And as a reserve or as a backup, commonly known as engine 5.
Mhm, mhm. And then rescue?
Yep, rescue, we have the 2 trucks in service, and the third one that we all talked about a month or so ago
Right.
is on order.
Okay.
They're facing some of the same dilemmas that a lot of manufacturing is, raw materials, getting those parts and stuff like that. So we're hoping by the end of the summer that we'll see that truck.
And
I am waiting on a loaner that is part of the package. So.
Thank you.
So I just want to echo the great job you're doing on everything relating to COVID. And certainly every single person that I know that has gone to get a shot at, Quinta Gamlin comes out and just is amazed at how organized and orderly and what a great job. And we've seen that reflected in the paper as well, the newspaper. So awesome job you've all done there. And thank you so much for it. Just a quick question on the EMS stipend. Is that just raising the stipend for everybody that goes on a run, or are you expecting a whole lot more new people to come
Yeah, so
on?
it's a little kind of multifaceted thing. So some of it would be a raise. So the average time dedication is about 2 hours for a rescue call. So that, is what it takes there. We've also seen an influx of calls or an increase in calls. So we're at the point where we have to incentivize staffing 2 trucks. And that's what we're looking to do here. And we've been doing it. It's just, we could use a little bit more incentive to do that. Going out 3,000 times a year is pretty busy. Second only to Newport, City of Newport, and then Bristol, Newport County. So, we're pretty busy on that. And I think by getting that second truck out, by staffing that also is where those revenues come in. So when we call mutual aid, the insurance companies, Blue Cross, or any of the health insurers, we'll pay a portion of that, and mutual aid the town that comes in will get those receipts. So if we can reduce some of the mutual aid by staffing the second truck, that'll help us in a bunch of different levels. And I like our people to be transported on trucks. That's something I've said from day one. So that's really the initiative here, is to make sure that we get our trucks to our citizens and residents and visitors.
There's no doubt that we're a really busy town with that. I mean, and with rescue in particular. So, I think anything we can do, we realize how fortunate we are to have a continued volunteer department overall. So anything we can do to give those incentives and to get more people interested in it as well, I think is really important. And how is the, I don't know if it's in here, I'm sure it is, like the tax incentive going, the
Yeah,
property.
so that's been kind of staying as projected. I can't, I'm not gonna lie and say that it's we're attracting people left and right, but it's maintaining what we have. It is attracting some new people, and I think, it's doing what it was supposed to.
Okay.
At this point, so.
Chief, maybe you can come back to us later on in the year, maybe late summer or early fall. Come back and give us an update on that.
Sure.
Great. Aaron?
Thank you, Chief. Thanks for coming here today. And, I couldn't believe it. It was like, felt like 2 years ago, I was in your office and I was saying, what happens like if there's a hurricane or something like that? What do we do? What do we do to prepare seniors for that? And you said, get them on the special needs registry. And I can't help but think how forward thinking that was, because you've been able to use that special needs registry for vaccine distribution and everything like that. And so I guess the question I had was, to what extent has, being able to use that list as kind of a way to distribute the vaccine, to what extent has that been able to help actually build that list? And have we gotten to a point right now where it's going to be even kind of hard to move the needle if we try to get more folks signed up on something like that?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's people that meet the criteria to sign up for that state-run program. It's very beneficial. As I said, it connects to 911. So when you fill out that information, if you're on oxygen or you're not mobile, that'll come up on the dispatcher screen up in Situate at 911, and they can relay that information. So it's very good. Unfortunately, one of the downsides of the COVID-19 pandemic is when they announced that as an opportunity for people to get the vaccine, everybody started signing up, whether or not they belonged on it or not.
Oh, okay.
So that's, you know, I think they're at a point now where they're trying to kind of cull through that and just verify that people really should be on that list. But otherwise, I had downloaded it prior to that announcement, so I had a pretty vetted list and was able to kind of go through it based on the criteria at the time. So,
Okay.
you know, it was helpful. We certainly reached the people that needed it off of that list, and you know, I wish we just had more of it.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's got a couple 100,000. We'd be in good shape here, but you know, that's the game of supply and demand.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah, that's good to know. Thanks for, certainly letting us know that, you know, the people that do have the special needs still, probably should be signing up for it. So that's really good to know. Thank you.
Can you just follow up on that for 1 second? I mean, I came across that somewhere in an email or I don't know where I saw that, or it could have been in social media, I'm not sure. And it was probably in relation to hurricanes or something like that in terms of power outages and all of that. So I ended up signing up my mother for it because, she doesn't have electrical equipment, but she really has a hard time getting around. So, and so then that was like a while ago. That was probably in the fall or the summer, whenever I saw that. And then it ended up being used for this purpose. And I thought that was like really good. But I think that but I was trying to like think about it. I know now what it's called, but I couldn't think of it at the time. And I said, I know I signed you up for something. I bet that's why you got called. And I'm just wondering, and I went through different things and I could not find it online. I'm sure it's easily there now that I know what it's called. And I'm just thinking about other people, some people that I know, some of her caregivers help other people that they work with who may not be on the list. I think of like our 107-year-old resident who's very mobile, but so how can we, after the pandemic, because most of the people in that age group have hopefully gotten their shots by now. How do we let people know about that, so that they're clearly understanding, or their family understands that that's out there?
Sure. So it's on the Rhode Island Department of Health website. I know that's kind of a cliche line, but I also know how websites are. And some are easier to navigate than others, and sometimes very hard to find these things. So my easiest suggestion is certainly the fire department's always available. You can refer them to us and we can get them in the right area. We have Mary Ann Quinn, Senior Services at the Rec Center, that can guide them into the same direction, and then Carusi as well in the social services. So they're all familiar with the program and they can get people registered. We can do it right over the phone. It's really a one-screen thing. It's not that bad. So if they're in need of help and they need to get on that system and they're having difficulty navigating the internet or the Department of Health website, certainly refer to any one of us. Will help them through that process.
So my question was a little bit before that step, actually. It was like, I probably was looking all over EMS for this, but not at DOH. But my question was more about you maybe doing a commercial when we're back in person, on or even on Zoom at council meeting. It was more it's more making families and people aware that it exists than actually getting them signed up. Do you know what I mean? Because I'm not sure a lot of people know it's out there. Like I said, I just happened upon it because I get lots of emails from lots of different sources between work and here and everything else. And somewhere along the line, it came to my attention, so I just wanted to put in a plug that somewhere along the line, we just talk about that it's available, who qualifies for it, and then how you would go about getting on that list.
Yeah, you happen to do that.
Okay, thank you. So maybe Melissa and Chief, you can keep it tucked in the back of your minds for when we have an appropriate time, and Nathan, to have that talked about.
Sure.
What else? Chief, what do you have for us that you haven't covered already?
No, I think that's about it for tonight. And just thank you for listening, and appreciate all your support.
This is just so long with, so it's tremendous. Thank you, Chief.
Thank you.
Thank you.
So everyone, we're going to go back up to municipal observances. 4th of July is on there. And as you recall, we said we were going to speak about that this evening, as it not only 4th of July, but more specifically had a question about the last night with the 4th of July Commission. I do know that Michelle Martins is Zoom. Chris, could you bring her up as a panelist, I believe? There's Michelle. Hi, Michelle, how are you?
Good, how are you?
Good. Technology.
Technology, gotta love it.
Absolutely. Up to speed. A couple of days ago, we spoke on municipal observances, and a question came up from Councilwoman Perella, Vice Chair Perella, and it had to do with the last night. As you know, and 4th of July Committee took that under their wing on a go-forward basis, but on last year's budget, we removed it from the budget, having to do primarily with COVID, but on a go-forward basis, we left it out. Part of the conversation, and council people, please weigh in if I'm missing anything, had to do with challenges with volunteerism, challenges with follow through on people who were sponsoring it in the sense of dollars that went along with it. I speak of not the White family, but kind of the surrounding of that. So that was kind of what made us want to speak with you as you represent, of course, the 4th of July Committee, and get your perspective on that, and anything that you wanted to add before we went into that, because this part of the budget is honestly for you. So if there's anything that you wanted to share before you weighed in on last night, please feel free.
I did look into that today, and we had approached, I believe, the council in 2019 going into, well, 2020, early last year before COVID hit, about taking on the last night concert. Last year, our plan was to move our concert series farther into the summer so that it would take place the end of August going into September, so that the last concert of the series would be last night. This year, we are still planning on going ahead with our concert series in June, hopefully, and going into July 4th weekend. I did reach out today to my contact with the Philharmonic, which is David Gaspar. He said that they have nothing on the calendar until mid to late July. They won't be ready before then. But they would entertain a last night concert if it's, if we're able to have that at the end of the summer. The committee was really excited to be a part of the process. As far as when we helped out in 2019, our volunteers showed up and we helped with parking and whatever was needed by Tim Shaw at Parks and Recreation. I kind of have two hats on that day because I work for Tim and Sarah. So we were there in volunteer power. The committee would be, willing and able to do all of that work because volunteers are hard to come by, and we are lucky to have a very involved committee of over 100 people. The problem is that the $30,000 has been removed from the budget to pay for the staging. So according to the Philharmonic, Bill Brackett, who is the producer, he's our go-between. They need a specific stage for the Philharmonic. It has to be covered. There's a lot of details involved. So that's where we're at as far as how we're going to fund the second stage in September. So I think, the total cost of the whole thing in 2019 was $38,808. About $10,000 of that came from local community donations, also 1,800 of that additional 10,000 came from donations that were made at the concert series. The collections in the basket. So we would have to go after some separate sponsors. Some of them are not sponsors that typically sponsor 4th of July events, so it would be something completely separate. So I feel that we could work in that aspect. As far as, the funds for the staging always is the big elephant in the room. The staging for our concert series cost $65,000 for 14 days. And for that concert, it's about $23,300 just for that day, plus an additional $7,600 for lighting. And that's based on 2019's pricing.
So part of the conversation that we had a couple of days ago, Councilman Sweeney had brought up about an ongoing conversation that we've all had, talking about a permanent stage and exploring opportunities for where that could happen, whether it's where it currently happens, which is down at Independence Park, or maybe looking at an alternative location, obviously in Bristol, but a place that may work as a permanent area. Obviously, nothing has been finalized, but we've had this discussion multiple times, not just this year, but multiple years.
Yeah.
So I think that it is certainly something that I would say that we're all open to. We see savings, we see opportunity for not only for the 4th of July, but maybe concert series throughout the year, which brings more opportunities for tourism to Bristol. But obviously keeping in mind that volume and kind of we don't want to be invasive to the neighbors either, wherever this would end up being. So there's that balance there. And currently, I think we hit it as long as it isn't too much. So I'm going to ask Councilman Perrella, because this was her question in particular, to weigh in on her thoughts.
Well, we had this big discussion last year, and as we were at the budget time last year, you know, when we started out, we may have been at our regular council table, and as every day it got worse and worse, and we were further and further apart, and really didn't know what was going to happen. But it was pretty clear that we would probably not have a regular summer. I don't think we thought it would be quite what it was, but you know. But I think the question that comes up here, and I know this has been a longstanding issue about what the town's share is, and that we've not been able to raise the money the way that maybe they were originally, or the way we would hope, is my question when we brought this up the other night is, you know, is this something that if 4th of July would take on and it becomes, you know, your event, and, you know, whether we want to put some money into it or not, is it something that we give up completely, even just another year, and see if people miss it? And then are willing to step up and, you know, come back and say, well, gee, we really missed that event. We're willing to put money into it, meaning sponsors. You know, last year, everybody missed everything. So I don't really know. And that was a discussion. We had this discussion last year as well, because of, you know, is whether or not it's just too much cost on the town to do that, even though all of the musicians are paid by the Philharmonic and the Happy, you know, the White Foundation, the White Family Foundation. So I think that's the question that, you know, we're left with, is like, just, do we just say, you know, we just can't afford this event, we're not going to do it? Do we kind of just put it on hold for another year, and try to get people to really reflect on, hey, we'll bring it back, but you need to help us do that in terms of the community? Or, you know, so then the 4th of July issue came up, and that's kind of where I think we are. So I'm not sure, Michelle, if you see that as something that you're willing. My sense from what you said is you're willing to take it on in terms of the work, but not necessarily in terms of the money, because you've got your own fundraising already going, and how we would, you know, work that together, and whether that's something that, you know, we can come up with a difference. You're saying like we've been budgeting like what, 20, we budget like 30,000, am I right? Usually in the past years for this, or 25,000, and we go over about 10. Is that right? 10, 12,000? Is that what's happened?
Julie, can you speak to that, or Mr. Minister, can you speak to that? Because I don't recall. I know that last year, as you said, we removed it, but this is certainly not the first, second, third, or fourth year we've had this conversation.
Right.
It's a year on year.
Yes.
We're always upside down on it, if you will. So,
Well, Julie will look up the exact amount. I know where the last few years we were over budget. And I think it was raised a couple of years also. The council allotted a little bit more, and we still had trouble raising enough money. So I think the question is, if the 4th of July committee is willing to do it and they'll run their own fundraising, how much more would they need from the town of Bristol for the 4th of July allotment? And that's the question that we didn't have an answer for prior to this budget being created, but maybe Michelle has that information now. So the question to the 4th of July committee is how much money would you need from the town to put on the last night concert?
So as of right now, I'm already in the middle of my budget for this year. So I would have to go back to our committee for any additional funding for this, you know, as far as if there was money needed on our end. Also to add, I'm sure everybody's in the same position that as far as sponsorships, it's really difficult this year with businesses that have been affected by COVID. So we're kind of going into sponsorships a lot slower. A lot of the bigger sponsors that we've had in the past are delayed getting back to us. So for me to honestly say that we could take on this year an additional, nearly $40,000 expense, I couldn't do that without the town funding it. As far as, our conversations about staging, it all boils down to that stage. If we found a way to have some type of staging, that would solve most of our problems. I look at it here, we're spending close to $100,000 on staging. I'm sure even if we had a permanent stage, we'd have to, between both events, we'd have to still buy, have sound and lighting, but the stage expense would go down drastically for both concert series.
So may I think Mary captured it well, is that we've zeroed it for last year and this year, but I would say that we're open to the conversation of collaborative, because before it wasn't, nor was it your responsibility. The town had committed to it, but it wasn't feasible, and it continued not to be feasible. But maybe in collaboration with the 4th of July committee, it could be. So some of it can be offset by you, as you've said, by volunteerism and fundraising. But I would say that I'm open to collaborating financially with the 4th of July committee. If you see value in it, if you think you can make it sustainable. I don't think it's fair to ask you to do that this year unless you think it is. I can hear that you've got some serious concerns, and I respect that. I think we all do. But I'd be open to it for next year. Or if there's something else that happens that in the meantime, that is not a large ask, I'd be happy to entertain that even after budget, if there's an opportunity that we can find funds someplace. So
I think maybe a way to look at this might be, because everybody's getting back into it, and you made a great point, which I think we've all thought about, but just weren't thinking about it at this moment. And that is all of our local businesses, not only in Bristol, but around the state, the region, they are all like really stressed out financially. And so they're not up to par, they're not going to get back up to their regular revenues until this is declared over officially and at full capacity and whatnot. So maybe it's something that we don't do for this year, but, really do an effort with the 4th of July committee in the town for the following year, to like bring back the last night, and the 4th of July is going to take it on and see if we could generate, you guys are very good at, generating interest and getting people to rally around it. And that would also be a good way to assess whether there's even interest. But I do think I'm not 100% positive. I know that it's great. And I understand Michelle's, I'm in the same boat, like where I'm planning on in school summer programs, I'm hoping in person, but who knows, right? So, I think that we'll be in a great place, whether we're going to be in a great place for every single full-fledged event. Who knows at this point. And so maybe, we start phasing in some of our regular activities. We don't do all of them this year. You know what I mean? So if we have the Black Ships Festival, we have something else, but we should keep this on the table, and also let the Philharmonic know that because of the situation with sponsors and financially, that we would like to take a break for this year, but not necessarily have them give up or us give up that date, because I believe that they do this in several other places. And so I'm not sure if there's other communities that are waiting for them to be able to, oh, I have an opening, I can do it. I also think somebody mentioned the other day that even if we had a stage, it wouldn't matter because they have very specific requirements for what they want. So our stage would probably not be big enough and everything else for what they need.
It's the size that, and Michelle or Mr. Administrator, maybe you can speak, actually, Tony, because you were a big part of that in prior years. I think if we have a larger stage, but these are part of the larger conversations, I think it's reasonable, and tell me what everybody thinks, but I think that we have removed it from the budget last year and this year. I hear interest, and Michelle, I don't want to speak for the 4th of July committee, but I hear very large interest, as long as it's reasonable and attainable for the dollars, from the 4th of July committee to have the last night concert, whether it's the last night or part of the 4th of July series or whatever it is that you decide. Sounds like you want to do it as long as it's financially feasible. Is that fair?
Yes,
Okay,
Yeah.
all right. So maybe you can come back to us. I like the administrator's idea. Come back to us after you look at what your requirements are and what would be the ask to the town to be part of that success. And we've already found that the past was too much, but maybe in collaboration. And by the way, we've thanked department heads and departments, but I'd like to take a moment for all of us to thank you and your committee. When people think of Bristol, it's not, we say it all the time, but we think of the 4th of July. And when we think of the 4th of July, we think of the 4th of July committee. So thank you for all that you do and the other volunteers do to make it a tremendous season, not just one day, but multiple days of fun. So thank you for that.
thank you. Can you hear me? I don't even know if you can hear
Yes, we
Yeah.
can.
Okay.
You're frozen, but we can hear
You're
you.
frozen, but we can hear you.
me. Okay, thank you. I'll make sure I get the message back to the committee.
Thank you.
I-
Mr. Administrator.
I will send a letter to the Philharmonic expressing our interest in resuming in 2022.
Is everybody okay with that? Okay.
Yeah.
Is in regards to the stage, like, is there anything we can move forward there as far as working with or looking at or something? Because that is the main cost, right?
To that end, I know that
And that would
previous
pay itself off.
work was done for looking at it at Independence. I know that there were concerns about placement as it pertains to safety and dealing with that. And there was also concerns about the weather, so hurricanes coming in and taking it down. A concern that pertains to liability and all of those things. Looking at that along with other areas, I think makes a lot of sense, but I do agree with, I think working with the 4th of July, since they would be the headliner, if you will, right? But I think there's also another opportunity to use, obviously, if it belongs to ever, use it for even more than we do right now. But I agree. Let's work with the 4th of July,
I'm
specifically.
also-
What do we need?
I'm thinking Roger Williams University, the architect design, since we're not going to be full throttle this year, clearly everybody's getting at different times and events are going to be sporadic this year. I think next year we're still going to ramp right up, but maybe we could look into maybe some designs that could come in front of us to start, just to keep the conversation alive. So I don't know what you guys think.
I'll talk with Michelle. I don't know if she's still there.
I'm still here.
We just lost-
Oh,
okay.
she is, great.
So I'll reach out to Michelle and start that dialogue about what is the basic requirements.
Yeah.
And then maybe we can formulate something that, and I'm no expert on it, but I know that we would need a base that would weather for years, right? It's not gonna be put away. What does that look like? And you need to build from that to put lighting, to put sound and all of that. Those things don't stay up, but it needs to be, able to be used year after year after year and then weather the weather.
Exactly,
So,
exactly.
And it
in a-
needs to be
in a
built into the
storm,
landscape. I mean, in terms of, like, you can't have it just facing this big thing looking out at the water, you know what I
Right.
mean?
Right.
So maybe built into the trees or, something like that. I mean, I don't know how often, Warren's is used. I mean, I don't know if Michelle's still here. I think she
She
left.
is, she is.
No,
And
I'm
she-
still here.
Yeah,
I'm
yeah,
having
okay.
problems with the video for some reason.
Okay, have you, I know we had a little talk about, are you able to help offset some of those if you were to seriously sell some of your seating or your sections or just, something to generate revenue for the concert series?
So.
Do you think that $65,000 in expense brings in enough, it makes people it makes a lot of people happy, so I'm not saying that, but are the local businesses thriving as a result of it, or is your committee making money through the trucks and food trucks and things like that? Or is there another way to help generate money as a result of those events?
So I think that the concert series is a super benefit for sponsors, especially we were going to take it last year a little bit further. We usually do banners that hang on the stage And we were going to rent an LED board so that we could show the logo of the business, to try to support if they're be a sponsor of the series so that they could support the concert. It's all about when they're sponsors, they don't only want to help the cause, but as a business, they want the exposure and they want their name out there. So we were really trying to get creative to have it to be more appealing so that we could get more sponsors. That was the motivation. We came out of the gate really strong last year. We had a lot of new sponsorship, and what happened was as soon as COVID hit, they retracted. It was kind of a new way. It was my first year doing sponsors, and it was a new way of trying to do it, to give them more of a benefit for being a sponsor, because ultimately, we want to have the concert series and we don't want it to be the elephant in the room that sucks all the money out. As far as the vendors, we, for the trucks that are on the perimeter of Independence Park, that revenue is about $20,000 just in the truck rental. So that does help offset the cost. Also, the buckets that we collect every night, it ranges, it depends on the night and the volume of the crowd, but we do get a lot of generosity that way as well. And then the sponsors would be, a lot of sponsors, they particularly want to be part of a concert, even though we have different levels. They could sponsor a different event, like we have sponsors that do the block party, the road race, those kind of things. We do have other opportunities, but the most popular sponsorship is having their name at the concert. So we thought adding the LED board, even though it was a higher expense, we figured if we did it for 1 year, people would see what it looks like and be more intrigued to sponsor going forward, which would be part of the plan to bring in more funds to offset the cost of the stage. And if we took on something else as well.
I was talking not about the sponsors, which I think that's everything you said is like a great way to get more of the larger sponsors. I'm talking about the regular patrons and attendees as to whether or not you could sell some, I don't know, I don't want to use the word tickets, but people wanted to do something, they get a little something, whether it's a commemorative card or it's a t-shirt, for a $25 or $50 or $100 to, on the smaller side like that. And I'm wondering if there's something, if there was seating, or if you put aside like little section of tables, and not necessarily, I'm not advocating in any way serving drinks or anything like that, but just, where people could come and they could just be there and know that they have a space or a parking space, but they pay for that. And they pay for it either individually or by for each of the nights. I mean, for the whole thing together for some bundle of money.
Yeah, I think that's a great idea. The only pushback I've gotten over the years was the fact that it's been a free concert series to the public. And I think we wouldn't want the public to have any resistance in having to pay. That's why this year, being a hurdle that there may be, we may still be in the position where we're social distancing and having to worry about capacity, which I think is definitely going to be an issue. Which is why we're actively trying to move locations, because, looking at Independence Park and gating it off and telling that only a certain number of people could go in there, I think the public would be upset by that. So we want it to be a successful, positive experience. So we're thinking about moving it somewhere else so that it's easier to restrict in some type of ticketing. So this would be the first year we would even be attempting to do something like that.
So I wasn't suggesting everybody, I'm just suggesting if there was some sort of incentive for people to want to, they could buy a certain thing. They could buy this space, they could buy this parking space and whatever, and everybody else can go for free. Do you know what I mean? I'm just
I think that's great. The parking spaces, I don't know how, the thing is it would be public.
We don't have any.
Yeah. I don't know how I would charge them.
That's worth a couple $100 right there if it was a couple.
So I hear opportunity. Sounds like we've got some possibilities. So Michelle, I'll reach out with you, start that conversation about basic needs, and then bring it back to the council when we have some basic ideas of what we're looking for. And then we'll all discuss what we want to do as next steps, if that's okay.
Sounds great.
Okay. Michelle, is there anything else that you wanted to add before you go?
No, I just want to thank you all for your support. I know it's a big line item and that we ask of you, and we appreciate everything the town does for the committee and the success. I think that, I'm sure all of you have heard the feedback. The community really, they can't wait to celebrate. We promise to follow all the guidelines and do what's allowed safely.
Excellent. We're looking forward to, we call normal, right? So, excellent. Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Thank you. Have a good night.
Thank you, you too.
So if you look at the agenda, we've gone through everything that we can go through except questions that we have posed. One, we've just taken off, right? We've addressed that. May I suggest, let's go through some easy lifts on the questions. Number 2 was a town administrator contingency. I advocated very strongly on Monday for adding additional funds, and that guy over there took our funds away on our council agenda, that guy. So what the heck? So what I would suggest is maybe that our contingency was 10,000 for multiple years. It's on, the administrator is suggesting 8,000. May I suggest that we make it 9,000? To Tony's point earlier in that conversation, I think we're going to get requested for more funds this year with people getting back out and about, and anything that isn't spent, of course, goes back into general fund.
Right.
So it's not a bad thing. So may I suggest that instead of going to the 10 that we were in the past, that we make ours 9 and make the administrators 2. So for clarity, we're budgeted right now for 8,000, or at least suggested by the administrator, and the administrator's contingency is 1. So I'm suggesting 2 to the administrator and 9 to us. We don't need to vote on it. I just need to know that, does that sound reasonable?
I'm
Yeah.
fine with that.
Everybody okay with that?
That was basically the same amount of money we've always had in
It is.
contingencies in general.
It is, and then as Julie said, that generally stays in where we have been. In fact, it's a little bit above, so it gives us a little bit of wiggle room on it. Is that all right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Perfect.
Seems happy with that.
Okay, all right. So I'm gonna put a check mark next to that one because that's all set. So what is left as questions, and I'm gonna go with we had the electronic printed wish list. I said electronic and printed wish list from library. We don't have information, so we'll leave that open. We said we wanted to leave the conversation with the clerk about part-time and full-time till tomorrow because that was a larger dollar figure. So that leaves the part-time receptionist conversation as a question that we put out there. So Mr. Administrator, could you remind us what was budgeted and what would be, and what part of the conversation included, I think we called it key times, busy times, something along that line. What would be a fair way to look at what are busy times? So
We could do a survey. Actually, Tony, when you were administrator, I think you did a survey of busy times in the building, right?
Actually, what I did was I ran a sign-in in the front, and they had to check in for what department they were coming in, not for what business, but what department. And I had actually a whole list of it. So whenever they came in, they stopped at the receptionist and they just asked if you could just sign in and what department are you here for.
I'm not exactly sure when the busiest times are. Some
It's
start tracking.
$12,314
thank you.
for part-time under that.
But I would say to solve some of the issues with the departments taking routine phone calls coming in and directing them to other departments, perhaps we make sure we definitely have the lunchtime covered. So maybe for this year, we start with 4 hours and do
Like 11 to 2 or 10:30 to.
4-hour shift, 4-hour shift,
That's a good idea. Do it
10
10
to 2 to cover the lunches, see if they.
Is there any tracking under the current system? So every time I call 253-7000, if I hit Melissa, if I hit the town clerk, like how many calls came in, how many people hit that? Is there any way to,
All right,
is there any way to pull that data? I don't know. Just so we could get a baseline.
I'd have to, maybe we could try to figure that out tomorrow and report back to you tomorrow to find out when the busiest times, but I think for a start though, maybe 4 hours would help.
So, Mr. Administrator, the Councilwoman Perella said that if we look at our budget under Town Hall Complex, it was budgeted for 12,300 approximately. So if 4 hours, that was 2 part-time receptionists, full day? I forgot, I'm
Well,
sorry.
it was 26, 1920 was 26,000 and then it went to 12,000.
So what would, if it was 4 hours, is that the 12,000? Is that?
Uh,
I would say you would go with half of 26,365, because
Okay.
that would have been full coverage. And if we're talking about half the coverage, assuming.
So
we-
approximately 13,000.
Approximately
approximate.
13,000 should cover.
I
Okay.
mean, you just have to double check the math in terms of the hourly rate because of the, I think it goes up to 12.10, doesn't it? In the,
I think they were being paid more than.
oh, well, but they were, I'm just saying, like, the minimum was going up to, I think in the fall this year, usually it goes up in January. I think it's going up in October.
If that is how we want to proceed, I can certainly get numbers for you. tomorrow.
So I don't think it's fair to get an answer this evening, but maybe, yeah, if we could get an idea of what it would be to have peak hours and when in a reasonable 4 hours is sounds reasonable, at least so far, but come back and you tell us what you think. I see that this affects a lot of things. The clerk had mentioned, of course, about the part-time, full-time. There's an opportunity here to offset some of those calls. And it's not just the clerk, it's all departments, right? So maybe it's a overall benefit. I don't know. I don't know unless we actually put it into place, I guess. So, thoughts?
I think it's been hard for this year. It's hard to know because we went from one thing to try something else. And then when we get to there, we end up with this situation of, COVID and the building being closed. And I think this also, in a little bit, goes to Melissa's request, you know what I mean? Because we end up being closed, we end up having limited hours, ended up having appointments only, all that sort of thing. So it's hard to say like whether any of these ideas really work. I just think there was something special about having a person just as you wander in, particularly in the key months, and also just having somebody answer the phone and get you rather than go through all the things. I mean, there's a very long list if you don't know what you're looking for, and then once you hit the number for the clerk, it goes through like all the list of the different people that not people, but, land evidence, whatever, records. So I think there's something that's that personal touch. I mean, it's not like a huge amount of money. Personally, if it was like 30, 40, 50, 100,000, that's one thing, but it's 12,000 roughly.
Well, and to that end, maybe there's an opportunity. We certainly work with the administrator. Maybe we can look at the phone tree. And is there a more, I don't think it's illogical right now, but is there a possibility of making it more straightforward than it is? I don't know. But maybe that could help.
It's just how they all are. I mean, I think it's just how they all are.
We did make some improvements to it, and speaking with the staff, it was yesterday or the day before after we had this discussion. I guess the collection is the first button you can hit, and so they get a lot of phone calls for, because people don't want to go through the tree.
Oh, yeah,
But I think
interesting.
that the deputy treasurer did change up the funds a little bit. I'm not sure what improvements he made, but they did seem to think that was positive in the right direction.
And now they
Yeah,
have,
a little bit more about it.
and now they have automated phones where you can speak into them and say where you want to go or what you're trying to resolve. I mean, it's so sophisticated that it could be able to route you right to where you want to go.
If you call in right
I
now,
mean-
you're absolutely right. It says to hit one, but actually it doesn't. It says for COVID information before it gives you options, which I'm assuming was because we were getting a lot of questions about that. So just talk about it right away. Most of the doctor's offices that I call on, that's how it starts. Is that please don't come in without a mask and da, 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 da. So they hit those things right away, right? So maybe there's possibility there. I don't think we can fix it in a budget meeting tonight, but maybe we could take a look at that
Yeah.
and maybe we track it. And I do agree that there is magic about a person there answering the phone, getting people in, but are they just doing that? Is there an opportunity for that to be, is there anything else that can happen in the meet or in concert with answering the phones? I don't know.
I think they could be
So-
given some other like
Basic
you know,
duty.
basic
So-
duties. And I think as people,
But I don't know.
come back and if the doors are going to be open eventually, I would assume they'd be open, just, or no?
Well, those are open.
Yeah, okay, so.
Yeah.
I mean, as people come in, especially in the summer months when they just kind of wander in, looking for information on the town. It's a little harder to find someone around here now, you know what I mean? It's before you just walked in and everything was open. So.
It's
We don't,
safer.
we don't, oh, I know,
Yeah.
yeah, we don't know because we didn't have as much of that last year.
True.
The public computer there is used quite a bit too, so we might have to think about how we would reconfigure things so that we still have a public area available. I don't know if that's sufficient back there. I do see people there all the time also.
That's
so-
actually different than this system.
So that's actually. a
Right,
different
but I don't
system.
think there's room for another
No.
system back there, right? So I think it might take a little bit of.
So I'll tell you what, the goal is to
Make
make it easier. And if what is being proposed doesn't, then this council is of course open to that conversation. The goal is to make it easier to get to where you want to, take some of the burden off phone calls, right? If you want DPW, then you want to get to DPW. If you want taxes, you want to get to taxes. So if it's a person here, or if it's changing our phone system, or a combination of both, we're open to it. Is that a fair way of looking at it? I don't think we're gonna fix it tonight, so.
Has there been a lot of complaints, or is it like, how does this?
I'm not getting
I guess
any
I'm trying to
complaints
understand,
about it.
like, we had all these receptionists, now we're taking away, now we're going back. So I guess I'm trying to understand, like, well, what's the real, what are we really trying to resolve? Like, I guess I'm still, like, is the phone system not working, getting a lot of complaints, or just sort of?
Personal experience is when, for my work, I was so against automatic calls to patients for what we do. And I was thinking that our population was primarily seniors.
Mhm.
And I thought that it was the wrong way to do things. I thought people wanted to talk to people. Turns out I was completely wrong. People don't want to talk to people. They love the automated service because they could get what they wanted quickly. There was no salutation, it was quick, and it was completely surprising to me because I really thought people wanted to talk to people. Now, ultimately, of course, they do.
Sure.
But the way my experience with thousands upon thousands of patients, the majority just wanted to go through the system quickly, get what they needed, and move.
Got it.
So to your end, whose question? This was Mary, right?
Yeah.
So I'll defer to Mary. I don't know what
I mean,
the goals.
it's, I mean, I'm not sure that many people have had, I haven't heard a lot of complaints one way or the other.
No, that's.
I
good.
just
wanted to know
I just
where
think
this was-
it's just an issue. I think that is just not a good system. It's certainly for part of the time, but it's just not it takes, in my opinion, like if you're doing robocalls from an organization and it's whatever, it's one thing, but it just seems like it takes a lot longer, especially since everybody doesn't have everybody's extension number. If the public all had that, I guess if you went into each department on the website, you'd find that. But a lot of people aren't doing that,
Mhm.
I just think it's kind of,
So it sounds like it's a kludgy process. It sounds like the system is not necessarily all that user friendly.
I mean, I don't know.
I don't know. I'm just trying to-
I mean,
I'm
I'm
just
not
trying to
a
pinpoint
big
exactly,
fan
like,
of those systems, so I don't,
What we need to investigate.
Weirdly enough, neither am I,
Yeah.
but they were both outgoing and incoming.
yeah.
The people that we were working with
Yeah.
liked it better because it was quicker. So for example, for here, it's for the clerk, press one. But we are not like that. We're very descriptive with it, and maybe that's why we go there. I get why we are, but again, budget tonight, right? So I don't think we can solve it, but maybe from this conversation, maybe we don't need someone in, but we just need to clean up or not clean up, improve what we have,
Yeah.
and maybe address those
I
concerns.
guess I just worry that we hire somebody and then the next budget season, we're like,
It didn't work.
we're cutting it.
So-
again.
Well, what if
And
you
it's
thought
like, oh my
about
God,
like maybe like a work study
rah, rah.
student, what about a work study student in the summer at
There you
least? So
go.
somebody could be,
Yeah.
so if people are wandering in, or something like that, just as a, to say, well, you can go down to the Maritime Center, you can go in there, or the restroom. I mean, I just think people wander into places like this, and I think it's all a matter of, I think, our own experiences and personal opinion, right? I mean, I think the place looks nice, don't get me wrong.
Yeah.
It probably looks a lot more professional than when everybody was just open,
True.
but it's a whole different world.
Yeah.
And you do this, and if people are looking, like I've come in here a few times, and if it's like, okay, I know where I'm going, it's like, okay, where is somebody here that I can catch up with? And there's,
Oh, no, go ahead.
no, so it's just, I think we have to just be sure about that. And
Sure.
if people are gonna wander in, I mean, I don't know. I think that's a lot of changes in the town hall that was like a little bit more open. And I'm not saying that in any disparaging way, it's just kind of, I'm just looking at the look of it.
Aaron, I know you wanted to say something.
Well,
Took a minute.
I was just gonna say, I remember when we first went to that and I just stopped even calling because I never could get to where I needed to go. That was the problem. And so I would just come over here and go talk to Lou or something like that if that's what I needed to do. But if we changed it, and if there's wasn't that modification that was made, that may have improved things enough where, and to be honest with you, I probably shouldn't have been wandering in here to maybe do what I wanted to do. If I would have been able to get to where I wanted to go, then that would have been one less person in the building. But sometimes, if that modification does a job, then maybe it does the job.
So to that end, if you look, and I can see it from here, but if you're on the other side of these walls, there are enhanced monitors now. So there's cameras for safety, and there's cameras so when someone comes in, and not just because you can't see eyes of them and they can't see you, they can actually see people walking in. And I know that firsthand because you can't tell, the mask, the hat, and other times they would kick you out, right? But now it's considered normal. But I'll walk in and someone will come up sometimes. They go, "Can I talk to you?" kind of thing. You know what I mean? So I don't find the response time, the human response time here to be an issue. I find that maybe the phone system could be, but I do concur that I would rather not hire somebody to then get rid of them. And I don't think that's certainly what's proposed here, but I didn't want to even be close to that, right? So I would like to, personally, I would think if we address this question as, let's see what we can do with what we have right now, maybe, and possibly improve the automatic phone tree, if you will, maybe make it more simplistic and less verbiage, and see if we get a positive response to it. But I'm open to suggestions.
Maybe on the website, I don't know, like key numbers could be just listed up front. But I mean,
Extensions right on there, I don't think.
Something like that. I mean, I've taken to looking up with my phone or on the computer, like a phone numbers, and if it was there, rather than have to go in and, go in again and find stuff. I mean, that might be a helpful thing. Maybe some of those, I don't know if they're gonna do it, but how
Or
you
you
do
mean,
it.
you need to be able to search.
No, I just feel like right on the front homepage,
Or say
right?
contacts, but.
Yeah, something like that.
What if you press 1, you press 2, that kind of thing.
And also, I think that what about if you had that calendar, I don't even know what we do, but if you send something out that has, or even in the bills, the tax bills, it was just like, here, we're going to make it like a little magnet thing or a little simple card, that they can just keep by their computer. If they're looking for their phone, if they're looking for something to make it a little bit easier, so we're looking for either by name or by department, and not just clerk, but the clerk, the debit tax records, not tax records, handout and licenses, certificates, whatever. I mean, I think you go through, if what you're looking for is at the end of that list, you spend a couple of minutes. I mean, probably not, it's probably a minute, but it's like, seems like forever.
Mr. Administrator, thoughts?
Well, we can certainly work with our phone vendor to see, get the data on where the calls are coming into. So maybe we can try to neaten that up a little. But I gotta be frank, I don't hear anything complaints really about navigating hall.
There you go.
Quite often as I'm walking first, I'll be all set, that's what I get, 100% of the time. The only times we've had issues that I can call are when they're voting and people aren't wearing masks. I mean, other than that, I don't hear any complaints about people getting lost in here or being unhappy with their experience here. It's actually pretty opposite. You think that taxpayers would be a little aggravated.
Can you hold on just one second? This says it's shutting down. That's, I don't know if we're still, and I don't know if the microphone is still on.
Quit.
It's technology.
So,
See, I'm gonna find that people are happy, sometimes it's like, it's not.
Chris, are we down?
You're still on.
Excellent.
So we get to see the sunny people of Hawaii.
Yes.
yeah, so anyway,
So you're not hearing it?
I'm not hearing it,
Okay.
these,
Well, then,
people are unhappy. I look at your laws and fix it, but I have. I think there are issues.
well, I'll tell you what.
It's with a phone.
I'll tell you what, if we're not hearing, if this question was about, this was addressing an earlier, Melissa, you had brought up about phone calls getting there that needed to go someplace else. So maybe we can do some clarity on that particular one. So I know that when you call in, it gives examples of things that you may want, why you'd want to call the clerk or ask the clerk. Maybe we can make that a bit more simplistic. For the clerk's office, 1, for taxation, press 2, treasure, and then if people need more information, I think they can pretty much figure out. The only one is, is when you call the administrator's office, it says for trees and the administrator, and it's a very strange, but I know why. So maybe I don't, that one I guess makes, but maybe we can get rid of the superfluous. But to the administrator's point, if there's no problem, Hi, everybody. So if there's not a problem here, and if the phone system can be tweaked and improved, how about if Mary, this was your question, so I'm gonna ask you this. What if we take a look at making some adjustments to the phone tree to see if it improves it? And then maybe we can look at this again. I know it's after budget, but this was your question, so I defer to you on what you feel is a
Well, I mean, it's
resolution.
not a ton of money, so I think if we even had to revisit it, give it some time to retry it. I mean, the budget doesn't start for a while, even our public hearing's not for a while.
True.
It could be something, and our final vote is not until May, isn't it? Something like that?
And we've got the provisional vote
Yeah.
next month, but that's provisional. So you're right. We
So,
have
I
to
mean, we
have
do
public
have time
hearing
to-
and
You
conversation.
have time
Absolutely.
to
We do.
address that,
You're
and to, I think if it's a super busy department, again, one hand, if it's the clerk or the taxes, that's who most people are gonna be calling for, one of those
Mhm.
groups. So it makes sense to have them up front, but like, as Julie said, it's also like, just give me anything.
Just give me a
or-
human.
Or just give me a 0, like, hit that button 0 and get
Okay.
to somebody. So I think that people.
Which is not a horrible thing, by the way. I mean, if
Right.
somebody wants to do that, we're happy to help them and
Right.
send them to where
It's a
they
great
need to
point.
go. So we
Sure.
don't
It's a
mind
great
that.
point.
We're not.
You got billing, you need to call back. That's not how we roll, right? Say, hold on one sec, we'll help.
Julie,
right?
this is
So-
why I have you on speed dial.
Okay, all right, so we can address this again, what, Mr. Minch?
Yeah, I'm sorry, but just, the receptionists that were here, the reason why we don't have them now is because of the coronavirus and the pandemic, and we couldn't ensure their safety with the public coming in when we reopened. That's the reason why we stopped it. Once we realized things are actually pretty smooth without the reception also. But I don't want, there was no reflection. They did a phenomenal job and they were very polite to everyone and helpful. But it wasn't, we didn't eliminate the receptionist for any other reason other than at that time we had people keeping them safe.
Got it.
And that was, but I'd gladly like to see them back here, but a little bit of a problem is once they were gone, we realized that things are still flowing pretty smoothly. But we could, if it would help but I personally, I'm not hearing any major problems right now.
Well, if they're navigating through town hall with no issue, and we can tweak the phone tree to make it more efficient and maybe a bit simpler, then maybe we can take a look at this in a reasonable amount of time. I don't know what reason, but I do agree that maybe after, before final budget, we could come back and see if there's still an issue that we want to address.
Well, I mean, you
So-
could even do the phone by then, but I mean, you can see what it's gonna be like, because this year is gonna be I think fiscal year starting July 1st is going to be a little bit more of a normal year
Yeah.
than what we've been in. You
Agreed.
know what I mean? So.
Okay. Tony?
Yes, no, the only thing, and, to the point of the lunchtime, I'm just thinking, what is the burn now with the various calls, and I agree with you that I haven't heard complaints about people calling here, except, no.
All of us have complaints.
Yeah. No, but
Nice.
That being said, I like the idea of that 10 to 2 block where it takes up some time there so that, if any department is down by people, they're not taking up all the calls. That, I think that would be a neat idea to at least give it a shot at that. It certainly would be a way to test the waters too, and say, okay, hey, it works. maybe we can expand it to the full day if necessary. If not, then, but during that block of the lunchtime, I can see how it can be problematic for some departments,
Yeah, I certainly would be amenable to that, and that does make sense.
I mean, even if they could, I mean, I don't know if people could take on, you do mailings or, in the middle, people are really busy with whatever, depending on their ability to be able to just be doing both things and entering data or entering certain things, if it's like simple, basic stuff while they're sitting there.
So what is proposed? So I heard a couple of things. I'm personally okay with moving forward as is with some improvements to our phone tree. I'm not against the other aspect of having a part-time person. Personally, I'd rather not add, not because I just don't want to spend the extra money. I'm cheap like that. And if it feels like it's being addressed at this moment, if it was a major issue, I think I would absolutely be 100% on board. I'm not opposed. I don't know. I would rather not personally. But if the majority council wants to do it, I'm certainly not going to oppose it. So what's everybody's thoughts? I heard Tony saying he's amenable to it. Tim? You-
Also with you,
Kind of-
I feel like I still need to have the data. I want to take the steps, see if we can move, see if we can tweak the phone a little bit,
Okay.
see what's going on.
Mary?
Well, I mean, obviously, I like the personal touch myself better. I would rather.
No,
have-
I don't think
would-
anybody disagrees with
I would
that.
rather have
Yeah.
the person there,
Okay.
but I mean, if, is it, how big a battle is it?
Yeah. Aaron?
For me, it's just the phone. I think making whatever adjustment needs to be made. I think it sounds to me like we've moved in that direction a little bit, and then we're continuously improving on it. And so,
If I can find some way to make it more
You know what?
shorter and more to the point, we will certainly do that.
I should probably listen to the new system that you've set up, because I haven't heard it yet, so.
And I will take.
Very contested.
Makes me crazy, I have to tell you.
So I'm gonna take what I feel like the majority is okay with current, but is absolutely open to if we need to make changes and improvements, we're all okay with it.
Yep.
So I'm gonna, and stop me if anybody disagrees, we'll go with how it is right now with some improvements to the phone tree, and then maybe come back and not at this budget hearing, but after that, and maybe at a council meeting or afterwards and say, how's it going? Is it better? But the problem is that we're not hearing complaints right now. So I don't know how
That's my problem.
You know what I
don't
mean?
Have any data
Yeah,
or anything to make
yeah.
a decision.
People are
on.
used to it, but they just get
need
like,
data.
I think people might just get frustrated by it. I mean, people are used to this whole thing all the time. I mean, so
Okay.
every single one of us has said, we've had an issue with it, but you just do it because that's the way it always is. It's like, no matter where you go, that's where it is. But we know that it's been a lot easier in the past.
Yeah.
So, I mean,
Okay. All right. So we'll leave it as is for now, and open to possibilities of change if suggested and recommended by this council or the administrator, honestly. So the other question that was, well, we have actually hit all of the questions. The last piece that was on here was discussion of the town administrator's recommended level of funding, not level funding for regional school district. So that's on here. So what is being proposed, Mr. Administrator, you put a 2% increase in, am I correct with that?
I did,
Proposed?
yes.
And just a reminder, I know everybody knows, but next Thursday is our second joint finance committee meeting, which we would vote on a budget for that. Wednesday is our regular council meeting. So there was a lot of discussion at joint finance about a lot of things, but I think we didn't go too deeply into, as we don't typically, those percentages. I am very comfortable as this budget is so far. I think that you all are too. The reason why I say that is that most of the questions and most of the adjustments have been minor, if nothing at all. And it sounds like we are all, with these questions aside and some other tweaks, that we're very comfortable so far. And I think that's based off of the, if you look at the administrator's summary, right? The letter talks about what our tax rate would be proposed to be, and I'll bring you back to that if I may, which is the first one. Let me get to the tax rate, sorry. On page 2, yes, it is. There it is. So the portion would be, let's see, 41 cents is the adjustment. So let me say that in what it is and what it would be. 1407 is what it is, 1448, and that would include a 2% increase to the schools. And I'll remind everyone that what was being requested by the school committee was a 3%. And not to go too deeply, too far into too many things, I know that there are state funding. Friday, some of us were at Quinta-Gamlin and the governor was there. I did ask the governor directly about plans for budget and specifically with education. Talking with our senators and reps previously and currently, the feel is that most of the time education budget doesn't get touched. So, and that has been past practice. All of that means that it seems as though the governor was aware of our decreases in the past, understands the challenges, and was pretty clear. He knew about it. It wasn't like I needed to say this is what's going on. He was well aware of it. So it sounds that there are state and federal dollars that are going to be coming to the school. So I think that'll help offset that. So I don't think it's just us and that's it. And Mary, you said that at joint finance, I think others did too. So I guess what I'm simply saying is that the 2% plus the additional funds that were not figured into the school's budget, I think will get them to actually more than 3% that they're asking for. So I'm very comfortable with this. As much as I can be, no one wants to raise taxes, either do I, but this seems extremely reasonable to achieve our continued goals. Thoughts from my colleagues?
Well, I mean, I would love to see this go below 41 cents. I think that's kind of high. But having said that, there's nothing in here that is, extravagant. There's
Agreed.
nothing in
Right,
here.
no.
Everything, the administrator and Julie have done a phenomenal job in
Yes, you
cutting.
have.
And
Thank you.
everything is pretty much as level funded as you can be, or trying to address issues to make us more efficient in the future. So I don't really, I'm just hoping that the federal funds come to the town as well and helps offset that. That's kind of what I'm hoping. And we've gone through a tough year. And so, this thing, just like the town is going to have some extra revenue. So the public's going to have a hard time coming up with some of this in some cases. And I think we just have to come up with some creative ways to try to think about how we stabilize our tax rate for people who are older and for young families that, are working, your everyday jobs, and that Bristol remains affordable. We all talk about it. I don't know what the strategies all are for it, but we really have to give it some thought and creativity, I think. So that's not a reflection on the work the administrator did or anybody here. It's just the point. I do think I was happy to see the 2% as opposed to the 3. And I actually think that they will end up, no matter what we give them, or even if it was less, they're going to have there's tons of federal money coming in. And a lot of it, and I was there when the governor made that comment last Friday. And I think his general, I don't want to put words in his mouth or commit him to anything, but I think his general feeling is that no town should be left holding the bag of a problem school district. Did you get that impression?
That was, I would take that as the takeaway, yes.
Yeah, and I think what he can do about it, I'm not really sure. But I think that is something, with all the federal funds that are coming into the state, into locals, I think that's something he'd probably try to address. I don't know, is that your sense, Steve?
Perfectly, yeah.
So, I mean, so I think it would be nice if we were able to figure out what that would be before we finalize the budget, because we may be able to adjust it slightly in that regard. But, I think the 2% is a good starting point.
Anyone else?
And a good ending point.
I know what you meant. Anyone else?
Just in the sewer fee, I took the number there and divided that by 365. Comes out to $1.56 per day, less than the guinea bar to flush your toilet.
Consistent.
Yes.
Yeah, the sewer
Quite a
use
candy
fee,
bar.
in how I like to look at the sewer system is it's the complete opposite of our water system. You have a treatment facility and you have a collection system, and rather than a treatment facility in a distribution system. So what I ask is that the residents of Bristol look at your municipally run sewer system and then look at your water bill. And I'm very proud, I'm actually proud, and I don't hesitate to suggest that we make those recommendations to the sewer treatment plant. When you look at it, as Tony said, per day, it's quite a bargain. You can compare that to a cell phone bill or a cable bill, if anyone still has cable or internet. And I think it's a very good deal. It runs very efficiently with the personnel there. And I'm very proud of the sewer system.
Well put, well put. No one wants to increase, but I think Mary's captured it well, is that this is a very lean budget. We've all said this throughout this process. And quite honestly, it's not just this year. Is that what was brought to us? You didn't cut out things that we needed to then put back in that were just key and important. All of those things that are there, all of us have talked about continuing with capital projects, things that are, and also capital budget more specifically, is raising those funds so we borrow less and we have the funds for continued road improvements. For, I mean, how many times have we talked about truck replacement? You asked, Tim, you asked tonight, the chief, right? It's not just that, it's cars for the police department, it's cars for, well, DPW is another one that comes up. And it's, Chris was talking about a couple of days ago with kind of a replacement plan for computers. So all of that is that good process. So we're not surprised. So we don't get things that are breaking, that we have things that work correctly. We use them through their lifetime and we replace them when it's time. So this is not mutual admiration society hour. This is good work done and appreciating it. So no one wants to raise taxes, but people that work here deserve a reasonable increase, and that's what's built in here. People that work for the town do a great job, and everything else is very, including that, is very, very well controlled. I shouldn't say everything else, including that is well controlled. Who else? Anyone else want to weigh in?
One quick comment that, is another way to look at this as well. Like the chief said tonight that the ISO rating, so the better we have, the better our departments are run and maintained, the better it is on our constituents for lowering costs in other areas. So potentially our homeowners insurance is basically what he's talking about, right? And so you might see a decrease. I think that goes across the board to a lot of the places. Like, I mean, EPA and DEM can be on us, and they have been on us over the years. And that costs a lot of money to remediate if we get to that point. So we constantly have to upgrade and keep things going, or else it's going to cost us more money, and it's going to, it's just going to be money kind of wasted. And instead, we've got to fix it, and we've got to pay a fine, let's say.
It's cheaper to go to your doctor every year than go to the emergency room. So it really is.
I mean, we do a good job in trying to maintain all of our stuff. And I think a couple of people have said, and I've always been struck by this, no matter, for years and years and years. I mean, the people that work for the town take such great pride in what they do, whether they live here or not, and they're just so enthusiastic and, and get such good cooperation among the town employees all the way around. I think it's been like that for almost as long as I can recall. I mean, for long times. I think it's a credit to everybody who works here and to the management and everyone else in maintaining that, So.
Anyone else?
No, I'll just say that I also agree that I think it's a very lean budget. I think it's a very good budget. So thank you for all your hard work and all the department's hard work on it. Going into the schools, I'm very nervous. I'll be upfront in regards to the drop in the enrollment and where our projections are as far as kids. I know they talk about different programs and things like that, but I think it's almost like East Providence already has the holy grail of CTE programs, and we're getting going with some programs, but I don't know if that will necessarily drive up enrollment a lot. So I think as a joint finance, putting my joint finance hat on, I think we're going to be in this cycle where we're going to have a lowering state aid due to that. So I'm hoping this budget, we do move forward with like the 2%, and then hopefully the school as a whole could come back and get better finance as far as the whole system as a whole. you know, because we know there's good education. Everybody's having good education, good experience. You guys have kids in the school system, you guys rave about it, so we know there's a good system there. But I think we just need to like pull back and I think we can get into a stable budget there. And to Mary, I thought you brought up a good point in regards to the efficiencies in the town and running the town and keeping up with things. I mean, when the DPW director tells you that they had 0 workers' comp claims due to their trash automation, what does that say? I mean, that says a lot that we're taking care of our employees, we're taking care of our people. But again, that providing that efficiency where we're not wasting money going out to other areas, you know? So you know, you have to spend money, but it's also creating an efficiency on the other end. So I think we're getting there. But, you know, I'm nervous about JFC because I think that budget is growing exponentially.
It is,
Yes.
And
it is, and it can't.
and although I think we have a great system, I think we're going to be hitting with the lower enrollment, and the projections are that this is becoming more of a retirement town and there's less enrollment, I think, where we need to make sure we're pulling back a little bit.
I think
So-
that I think they're gonna have to consolidate and, you know, look at the policies of where kids can go to elementary school, for
Yeah.
example. You don't need to run all these schools if you have less kids. I mean, one thing I just want to point out
Sure.
to you, you know, it's not just the amount of enrollment. I mean, enrollment is a big factor. But one of the things that he said, I think the superintendent said,
Mhm.
it's sort of the wealth of the community.
Mhm.
As the property taxes not the property taxes, but as the sale of houses increase,
The values,
the
yeah.
values, you know, the state looks at like what they would call tax capacity,
Mhm.
which I don't agree with that and how they do that in some regards, because, you know, they'll look at it and say, well, you guys can afford all this extra money. Well, that doesn't help the seniors who are still in their homes, you know what I mean? So, I mean, I think that is really the issue. That's the issue that I think like places like Barrington East Greenwich have, where they have so little state aid because of that issue. It's not as much about enrollment. Enrollment impacts the funding formula as well. But I mean, that's the other side that, you know, we have to, I don't know what you can do about that.
Right.
You really
right.
don't.
And I think you bring up a really good point about the whole system as a whole in Rhode Island is broken. I think we need to take a look at the whole public school system as a whole. I mean, our schools are relics. I mean, you know what I mean? If you go through those schools, walk the halls, you know, there's been some improvement, but they're still quite behind. We're getting there, but, you know, and some of the schools in Rhode Island are really, really old and they need desperate repairs. But
The state put what, 200 billion. What did
I
it
know,
put?
there was
100
a
billion
yeah,
to
it was a
100,
fix
you
our
know,
schools
money.
money, but yeah,
2 billion, maybe not 200.
yeah. So it's a lot of multiple issues.
So as it pertains to budget, is there, we're not looking to agree because that would happen at joint finance, but as a council body, this is a massive part of our budget. Obviously, we all know it's over 50%. So this is a reasonable time and really a really good time. If there's objection or hoping to go a different direction, this would be a time that we could address it. So we're talking about making adjustments to other portions of the budget. So is there anything that anybody wanted to talk about right now that would go off? And
I'm
Mr.
sorry,
Administrator?
but just we would have been if we had done the 3% when we originally started, we gave when we first started the budget, if we were going to give the 3% that was requested by the school district, we would have been above the cap. So it wasn't even
Mr.
possible.
Administrator, would you just take a moment? You just said above the cap and just tell everybody what you mean by above the cap.
I'm not sure, Steve, it might have been.
Mm.
We had some statements. We would have been like right there.
We would have been
Very
right
close.
at the cap.
And the cap is, we know what the cap is, but if you could
Yeah,
just,
so it's, we are allowed to raise the tax levy no more than 4% over the prior year. So this would have put us right there.
right there, with no room for any adjustments on anything. So-
But I did want to also mention that this year, and I'm not sure how it went last year, but this year is the first one that I can remember where the vote of the Joint Finance Committee is after a provisional vote. So you actually will be having a provisional vote on this budget prior to, so a decision should be made preliminarily before the JFC. On the basis.
We've always
It will be-
been
I
on
thought
that.
we've asked that not happen. I thought we asked that
We
if you
have.
scheduled the,
I think the year before my hiatus, we did ask for that.
We've always been on that cusp, and it's just the way
Well-
that sometimes this floats.
Well, I think we can put it this way, if the JFC meets and they say, go to the 4%, we would have to meet again, and we would have to make significant cuts to this budget.
Which we've already spoken
3%
about.
was that cap,
Yeah.
3% was that cap. So 4%, forget, we would have to come back and we would have to take another run at the budget.
They're not gonna say that.
No, they're not even asking for it. So,
Well, I mean, the JFC is,
sorry,
you know,
sorry. The school committee is asking for it. They're proposing 3%
3%.
based off no state and federal increases. In fact, decreases is what they're budgeting for. So, Aaron,
So I do want to weigh in too on the budget. I think that this is good. What I was worried about last year was I was kind of envisioning this apocalyptic situation where we have rusty barn doors swinging in the wind and nobody's around, like that's the kind of thing that, I was worried about. And it looks like, a lot of great decisions were made last year. We made a significant investment in the schools. What did we fund them at last year?
Full fund?
It's like 3.85 or something like that.
I think you're
Was it?
right.
Yeah.
we fully funded, in essence, it was,
Yeah.
to refresh, they had asked for more than what they needed, and they had adjustments to their benefits, and we ended up proposing $500,000 less than what they asked for, which in essence was still fully funded because they didn't need those funds.
Yeah. But ultimately, it's, I'd love to see the federal money coming in and some of the state money coming in. Wouldn't that be great? Ultimately, I'd like to get a little bit more of a sense of, what we can be expecting. I don't know if we're going to be able to get anything like that, or if there's some way that we can, just model out maybe some of this is what happens if we get this, this is what happens if we get this, this is what happens to the schools if it's within this range of, state money coming in or something like that. It could be that along with the state money that comes in, these schools could essentially get that 4% funding that, they had laid out there, but that's not ultimately what they're asking for. They're not asking for the 4%, they're asking for the 3%.
Correct.
And we're coming in at the 2%.
Is what this budget proposes. That's
Yeah,
right.
is what
right.
this one proposes. And so, I wish we had more information. I'd like to maybe try to model it out a little bit too, and see that, if we're at 2% and maybe some folks are a little bit more comfortable with, 2.3% or something like that, based upon the models, based upon what we might be getting and what they might be getting, that might be something that we might want to continue to have a conversation about.
Well,
So-
the town and the schools will be getting federal funds for COVID. The caution is that you want to be very careful not to spend those federal funds on recurring
Right.
expenses, because then you
Right.
set yourself back
Right.
in the following year. And we do have a contribution from our fund balance already, so hopefully if we do get some federal funds, then that can help restore some of that fund balance that we're using.
Mm.
And we can have a thoughtful discussion on how best to utilize those funds.
Well, some of
But
those,
we are still learning information on what even is eligible. The state is even still trying to understand that. And the schools, we were recently given some information on the schools receiving federal funding also, so.
because I mean, like, that's a good use for like IT upgrades and things like that, because it's not going to reoccur again for a few years, we have a lot of those requests. I mean, and, the infrastructure fixing or whatever the case may be, right? Because gotta be careful it doesn't go into operations, because if it does, it's just gonna be like, oh, we've got all this money, now we'll find.
And now we don't
next
have
time
all this
around.
money.
Yeah.
So,
And we're
yeah.
raising taxes
Right.
significantly and.
Yeah.
it's not-
The other question I have is, Julie, has the info from the trust, are we starting to hear any more like concrete details about health insurance and things like that from the
They don't
trust?
have the final numbers out yet, so I
Yeah.
have their best estimates, and typically we do get the final numbers, but it's usually at the end of this process, so I can check in with them
It
again.
is so
tomorrow, but it
wild
should
to
be
think
one
that
where-
we have these
Tough.
predictions and that we can't have a concrete, but there's gotta be a reason why they do it that way. So.
My
Well, the budget
question,
would almost have to be like done in September, you know what I mean? More like the federal, I mean, although they might be in the same boat then, but I mean, if we were not on the state's fiscal year cycle, then we would have those answers.
So a
Yeah.
couple of things. One is we've talked about doing a fiscal year instead of 12 months, make it 16 months, 17 months, whatever it happens to be, to get on the states. So we're not guessing about these numbers. We would know real numbers. We've gotten pretty good at guessing. We've been surprised a few times, but they're pretty consistent. And they tend to send out the kind of the warning signs early enough that, and you guys correct me if I'm wrong here, but I mean, that's what we're seeing is that if there's, not always, but those big ones, if we see changes, we usually see them coming a ways off. So, you know, we can see the smoke from the train coming, if you will. So not perfect, but, and I think the school's been in a similar situation. I asked that the Joint Finance Committee 2 years ago, right? Not the budget we're in, the budget last year. They had a 1.7 million adjusted underspending. So extra money, for lack of a better term. The superintendent said that they're on track to have approximately, it was $963,000 of underspending this year. So when I hear those things, and I brought it up at the meeting, so I hear those things, it tells me that they do have extra funds. And I didn't say they have a lot of extra money, and it's a large budget. And you can't imagine that they're going to be, you know, end up with $10 at the end of the year. My goodness, they would be magical if they could. There's always going to be a little bit more, a little bit less, but that's why they have 4% when it's a little bit less. But I don't have a problem with them having extra. I just want them to apply that to next year's budget, the 1.7. They're trending at $1 million of ballpark, right, for this year. So I think that they are proposing they are proposing cuts. To Tim's point earlier, that there's a contraction of student population, then I think the school will respond with contraction in either buildings and people. Nobody wants anybody to go, and I'm not advocating for that, but we make adjustments here. When, you know, we talked about the receptionists, there was a conversation we had earlier when we felt they were no longer here because of safety concerns, but then we looked at it and said, does this make sense? And at the moment we said yes. There's a myriad of examples like that. Simply what I'm saying is that I think that they have budgeted with enough room in the past that their end of the year audits are showing they have additional funds that they can apply towards this year. I think they're trending that way again. Well, I know they are trending that way again. I am comfortable personally, and I'm not, you know, you all are going to make your own decisions. I'm comfortable with the 2% because I don't think we're hamstringing them, along with the additional funds that they are going to get, state and federal. I think we're going to get them too. This is also going to be another conversation on a side note that the council is going to have, because if those funds come in guessing what it is, how do we want to apply those? And you know, is it something that we're going to do as a capital project? Is it something that we want to do to use to offset tax increases for the next couple of years? And because of monies that we've spent, I don't know. But we're not going to make those decisions tonight. But that's my personal opinion. I'm comfortable with this as much as you can be while raising taxes. Nobody wants to, but this is an extremely efficient and good budget based off all the things we've already talked about. I'm not stopping the conversation. Is there anyone else before? Because we're not making the decision on what we're doing. We do that at Joint Finance, and we'll do that next week. But I wanted everyone to have the opportunity to potentially convince to do 0 or 18%. I don't know. So
I will actually need a number though to put, because it will go in the newspaper on next Thursday. So the vote of the provisional budget will be on Wednesday. Those numbers will be reported in the newspaper. So we will have a definite number from the council
Right.
before the joint finance.
Right.
Committee. So yes,
Right.
so I'll need a number.
So, but we don't need it tonight.
Tomorrow night.
Right.
It's okay too.
Well, do we have any,
Or Wednesday night, but I need it by, yeah.
Tonight or
Yes.
tomorrow night.
do we know how much money that we might be getting? I mean, in the schools, I mean, I know there's and there like some general preliminary, like here's what's coming to cities and towns, or I know that in some of the out of school time money, they're like looking at CDBG allocation-y type, like,
Mhm.
you know, mathematical stuff and other things like that. I mean, the formulas, do you have any idea?
Our exact number on the municipal side, I'm not exactly sure. I did look at the elementary and secondary school emergency relief fund. That's 1.9 million. But there are strings attached. It's just, you just can't do to whatever you want with it to help your budget. Like the local money, a lot of it's for broadband, water and sewer. So that would help us with our sewer. Much of it has to do with the coronavirus response, like like for example, town hall, we made some changes here. Also had to do with making up for lost revenue because of coronavirus. That might be lost revenue and food and beverage taxes and so forth. So hopefully we can apply for as much as possible and be approved, but I don't know yet. It's still very early. Same thing with the school district. I know that 1.9 million, they just can't take that off the top of their budget. They're going to have to apply for it for things like HVAC for the schools and ventilation for the schools. And there are a few other criteria that they had that I saw so far, but it's still very early. And the good news is we still have some time. The budget isn't actually final till April 25th. So as the information comes in and we start applying for the money and see what we can use, we can certainly report back to the council. But right now it's still very
I
preliminary.
mean, is there a chance that the tax rate goes down slightly
I-
into the 30s?
Always.
I
into
think so.
30s?
Yeah, I think
I mean, I
there
know,
is.
that- I mean, with the federal, I know often it does anyway, because of state aid comes in a little higher, a little something
Yeah.
adjusts.
As I said, when I opened up with this budget, this does not take into consideration any future emergency relief funds that may be coming our way. And we're hoping that will happen. But just as we planned last year, and I think you summed it up well, this budget, none of us here want to increase taxes. This is a modest increase. It's a low to moderate increase comparatively to past years. But where it's where I say it's a balanced approach, you said it, Mary, Spurley, we're not setting ourselves back for the future. So now we have major issues. Everything where this is an investment budget. So I'm happy. I think it was the way to go. We didn't add much to it unless there was going to be a return on our investment. So.
Yeah.
But we'll hopefully by the 25th, by the time this budget is adopted, maybe we'll know more about the relief funds that are coming to the school district and to the town.
Because if they put more money in, say, for missed opportunities of food and beverage, that could potentially be $200,000 to us, which could be, that would normally be applied directly to this as income. So that, you know what I mean, that makes a big difference right there.
Well, I guess the other thing, and I guess what the administrator was pointing out was that there's a certain amount of money that we might be getting with strings attached, and the same is going to go for the schools.
No
right?
question.
And so,
Oh, yeah.
we do have to, I feel like we ought to be awfully careful at this stage and just assuming that there's just going to be this, that the school's going to be, drinking from a fire hose when it comes to the federal money coming in, and so that's something that kind of weighs a little bit heavily on my mind is thinking about that and thinking about that they might not be eligible for certain things, maybe even because they're a regional school district, or they might not be eligible for certain things because maybe their HVAC system's all set, So that's just kind of something that, I'm thinking about right now as we're,
My comfort is, or I find comfort in more of the state dollars, not in those COVID emergency dollars from federal. From the conversations that I've had, as I mentioned already, that they're planning on decreases, and I think that's a very healthy way of looking at this, and plan for the worst kind of thing. But I do believe that they're going to see increases from the state. From my conversations, no guarantees, and there's no guarantees with us either. So, but I do believe that I have two kids in the school. Going to be in the school for a while. So this isn't 1 or 2 years and they're out. So my daughter's in 4th grade. My son's in 8th. They're going to be there a while. So I am 100% vested, and you don't have to have a kid in the school to be 100% vested, just for clarity. I believe that, as Tim was mentioning earlier, that's, and it was my word, but it was your initial comments about it's time, we need to adjust. We need to take down, if the numbers are going down, the school, I gave the administrator an example a couple of days ago about it's the parents who no longer have children at the home. Do they need all of that space? They still need space. They need good space. They have to expect things are going to happen, but do they need that much? Is it time to look at adjustments on that? And I hope it is, because I don't want anybody the teachers are so important. We all believe all of these things, but we can't keep going in this direction. And the numbers, and we all spoke about it, the numbers need to be attached to success. And I don't mind telling you, and I didn't mince words. I was disappointed not to hear that they didn't know where they were in their 5-year plan. What I mean by that is 5 and 5 is what the superintendent said, and where other communities that are currently in it, where they were and how much we needed to do to get there. Because in my professional world, you've got to know what your goals are. If you don't know where your goals are, there's no way you're going to achieve them. And that was concerning to me. I don't think it's the only thing, please, it's not the be all end all, but I think it's really important. That was the thing that we said, we're going to go this direction. And I think it needs to be, the dollars need to be connected to an education plan, something that we can all look at and say, this is where we want to go. COVID has been very difficult. I don't expect that it's 5 and 5, maybe it's 5 and 6, right? Absolutely understandable. But we need to say where we want to go. And I don't think those numbers are going in a place where the school is happy with, and they're the ones who make that policy decision. I'm not suggesting we should, but when we're making a financial decision, the only thing we can base it off of is success. And is the success where they want it with the money that we're spending? The administrator made a great point of talking about the per student cost. And those adjustments were made for the concerns that we've heard in the past from the school committee, and fair ones too, is talking about when you're not regional, you don't have to worry about the capital expenses, right? That's the town. Well, those things removed, we're still top. I want to say it was top 5. It was actually higher than that, but I'll say top 5. So the numbers are there. I believe the Joint Finance Committee's done an outstanding job continuing to support the school. And it's fair to say that I think that the school committee and the superintendent are doing an outstanding job. But I think our dollars need to be connected to what they are stating, their goals, not ours. Their goals were, this is what we want to do. Are they getting there? And I don't know if we're getting that clarity. And I think we need to point at ourselves a little bit and say, even what was brought to us, I don't want a document that's this big, but we did not get much to base a $55 million decision off of, including these education goals that I think we all agree, whatever they are, need to be clear and how we're going to get there. I'm sorry, I didn't need to make that a soliloquy. I apologize, but those are the things that I think we need. I don't want to tell them what to cut and what not. That's not our responsibility in our place. But I do need to know that they know what they want to do, and where, if they see the decrease, what are their plans? To your point, Tim, what are their plans to adjust as the world continues to change? Should we be doing what we're doing? I'm not suggesting changes. They know it better than we do, but I think we need to make them, or they do. I'm sorry.
One of the things to have a plan like that is, if we're going to have to go down a path, if it continues to shrink, and there are your basic, models that you can look at in terms of attendance and enrollment, but if they get a bunch of money that needs to be spent on improving the infrastructure of the buildings, you may not want to divide that up by every single building that we already have. If in 3 years, you're going to be focusing on a couple of, you're going to close a school, like an elementary school.
Right.
Where would they, what are their 2 or 3 or 4 best elementary schools in best condition that kids would go to, because if that's where I'm not sure, usually you can do these trend analysis on enrollment, where does that bulge happen? Is it there's just not enough kids, or is there going to be a group of pre-K, little ones coming up into the system? Does it fall down in middle school or high school? At one point we had 26% of our kids going off to private and parochial schools. We no longer have that number from Bristol going off to private and parochial. So if you follow where I work, you get a lot of kids filtering out in middle school, filtering out in high school. May not be to private and parochials, but it would be to Davies, which would be the equivalent of East Providence, or to Met School, something like that. And so into the charter, so you lose a lot of kids.
Yeah.
And so I think that those are the things that they have to look at, and I'm sure that they just know offhand. But I mean, if you're gonna get money for those things, you're not gonna put HVAC in, all their buildings if they're gonna close one.
To your point, and you made this at the JFC, was current laws say elementary kids can't leave the community, right?
Right.
Is that something that should need a larger conversation? I mean, consolidating that. I have 2 kids in the school. Would I be immediately? I kind of go, ooh, do I want that to happen? Do I really? And then I say, well, it's an invisible line, right? I mean, my son goes to KMS and his experience has been outstanding, but
UCO's a nice school.
and I know that's middle school, but Hugh Cole is a nice school, but so is Colt Andrews.
Right.
So is Rockwell.
Right.
So is there shared, the chief was talking about it, right? Earlier about costs. No, I'm sorry. It was the DPW director was talking about using Warren's tree truck
Right.
and them using
Sweeper.
sweeper. That's what it was. Thank you. Thank you. So anyway,
Yeah.
I'm sorry. I keep talking. Anything else?
No, I just want to say I love the conversation. It's really intriguing. And I think also what it does is talks about marketing our school system and our town on a much greater level. So if you're coming in here and you're going to want to plant your roots and have kids and put them through the school system, you're going to want to know that you have a school system that is on a stable footing and stable ground and not in this constant turmoil of cutting and every year going in and out of stability as far as finances goes. So I think,
We wanna have the best
I'm
school.
hoping for better, I think that we will get there. We will get there.
We need to, and we all love it so much, we need to have more joint finance committee meetings.
Yes.
We need to,
Yep.
instead of waiting until, not waiting, it's the laws and all of that kind of talk to that, but we need to be, we talked about the train earlier. We need to see that train coming to avoid issues, to find success earlier and make micro adjustments, not major adjustments.
So What
So-
what was the rationale for, I mean, I know when I said that the other day and people said, well, that's why it's so important to go back and revisit the enabling legislation. I mean, what has been the holdup of doing that? I mean, there's some really basic things that could be done that wouldn't be that controversial. There's certain things like maybe allowing kids, regardless of what town they go to go to the school, that would give you opportunities to either just pick a school, like where they used to call them like magnet schools, like a specialty school, like a STEM school versus a, whatever. And
You can make those adjustments without requirement, meaning give them the opportunity to have that possibility. And if parents and the school committee decide not to do it, it's that ultimately they would have the choice as opposed to not having. the
But why
choice.
haven't we, but we've talked about that enabling legislation for many, many, many years. So why hasn't anything gotten done on the change? Is it that we need to put together a committee of people to look at it? Is it this, that, where are the easy points of agreement that can be sent to the legislators to change right now? I mean,
I
we
think we
keep
do.
talking about it, but nothing really
I
transpires.
think the answer is great is the enemy of good in this instance. And I think we're trying to fix everything and maybe we just need to look at it. But I feel like I'm not the attorney, but I feel like we may be going, I don't want to go too far off.
Okay.
We are budget conversation.
Sure.
And I know this kind of loosely connects onto it, but I think I don't want to go too far off subject. If that's okay with everybody.
So did
So-
Julie need a number? Glenn?
Julie doesn't need a number this
Okay.
evening, but if the council is comfortable giving a number this evening, we can do that.
Well, I'd rather wait until,
I would too, because I find that I take all of this and I
I mean,
let
what if
it.
we find out that they're gonna get like $1 zillion and then we don't have to give them the 2%? We could give them.
If they're getting $1 zillion,
Yeah.
Good luck.
why would, right? So how many zeros in a zillion?
And then ultimately, like there'll be the public comment at the GFC meeting as well, right? So we'll have to,
Well, we'll be committed to what we're doing on the town level prior to the joint finance. Committed only means that we've pointed in a direction. The joint finance committee supersedes, once whatever the joint finance committee says it wants to do, then it comes back to us and we adjust accordingly, right? So
Right, yeah.
let me say it another way.
Yeah.
We're going to say on next week that our provisional budget on Wednesday, the day before joint finance, that we're doing this. This is our intention.
okay, so we'll have a vote
Correct. On a provisional budget, which will include what we are proposing
Yeah.
we're funding for the schools.
Okay.
He
so
does
it's
not
a-
commit.
It's not, okay.
But it's pointing to the right field wall saying we're
Okay.
doing that.
Right. So I just want to make sure to get this straight. So we're going to vote on the percent of money that will be giving to the schools that we'll be putting in our budget.
Correct.
And so if it's a
0, 1, 2, 3, 4,
vote
15.
or something like that on the number that we put in right there,
Correct.
we're all our own agents, right? When we
You
go to
still are your,
PLC.
right. So
Yeah.
we're saying we want to go this way. So the process will then go to joint finance. Joint finance commits to a dollar figure, which commits the town to a dollar figure. But the town ultimately hasn't passed its budget without public hearing. So then, so the next step would be the public hearing with, it's out a little ways, but the public gets to weigh in and say, why are you on line 7 giving $200 or $200,000 to X? I think it should be 100. And we all look at each other and go, my goodness, what a great idea. Let's adjust that, you know? So, or you need to spend $1 million more. So does that make sense?
Yes, yeah. So ultimately that'll be Monday for the public that wants to weigh in before
No.
Monday.
It's
on-
gonna be
okay.
on,
No, the public doesn't weigh in until after we pass the provision.
No, I just mean, not in a public hearing, but if like they wanna, you know, if they have a certain feeling about the school budget or something like that, they better let us know by this coming Monday.
Let us know before the
Right.
joint finance meeting on Thursday night,
Yeah.
honestly. So
It's fast.
Okay,
the
but if we're committing to
the
a,
intention of the council, the
Yeah.
Bristol Town Council, is passing a budget that is based off X dollars towards the schools, right? If joint finance disagrees and says 0, then our budget adjusts accordingly.
Yeah.
If they disagree, we're joint finance, obviously, but if we disagree and we go a different direction, we say 6%, we've committed Bristol to a 6%. And then we need to adjust our budget accordingly. So really the provisional is giving the community, the residents, this is where we believe is appropriate for our budget for this year. And then joint finance weighs in and we use joint finance to adjust the budget. And that's what is 100% in stone, is that once joint finance committee says, I'm going to use 2% for giggles. If joint finance says 2%, then the town then needs to adjust everything else it believes appropriate, but that number cannot change. So joint finance is final. Did I?
yeah,
yeah,
that's,
I
Okay.
mean,
yeah, I totally get that. So nothing has really changed since,
Agreed,
so.
agreed.
I mean, the biggest problem we have is like this, the schedule, because the joint finance ends up meeting before we even, our first meeting is before we even see our budget. And that is, I just find that's a problem, but that's in the enabling legislation. And then we're making decisions before we even, do our, so our provisional, it should be after, I think, and that's what we were trying to organize it that way, so that we would never be like, a few years ago, in a situation where, I don't know if it was this situation, but we were just sort of hamstrung, like we barely had our budget started and we already were making a final decision on the joint finance. So we asked them not to do that anymore so that we could, and I know they've gone out as far as they have, and I'm not sure why.
So there's a couple of things that control it. One is the enabling legislation
Right.
says that the budget must be passed by the end of March, just for quick math, right? So doing that, if you back it up, there's advertising requirements to talk about when you're going to have the meetings. That also then pushes it back, right? And the school committee has to have its budget out by, I think it's March 1st, to the Joint Finance Committee. So that's one of the requirements. The administrator has to have his budget
And
to
our
the
charge
council.
is to the council, the middle
And then you
one.
start doing that. And then there's the town of Warren, who has a totally
Right.
separate schedule. So stuffing all of this in together, Warren has its budget hearings earlier than ours. And they typically know what or at least they're comfortable with, or where they'd like to go, or where they're proposing earlier than we do.
Yeah.
So, but they're subject, just as we are, to the bottom lines of the joint finance. And this is the machinations that we go through, right? All right, so anything else before we?
Yes,
Okay.
just visit the schedule that we currently have.
Schedule that we
I
have.
know we need to meet tomorrow.
We're meeting tomorrow.
Okay, then we had Monday as an extra day, so is that in or out? No.
ladies and gentlemen, so the question was, Tony asked about the schedule. We're meeting tomorrow. We have human services tomorrow plus capital, right? Monday, at this point in time, depending on how our conversation goes on Thursday, is probably not going to be necessary. It hasn't in the past, but it depends on how our conversation goes tomorrow night.
Great.
And if we're left with a lot of questions tomorrow night that we can't answer, then Monday would be necessary. I would hope that we can get to a resolution by tomorrow evening, and I do truly think that we will. There's only a couple of questions left, and we can go through that once we talk about the rest of it. At least it feels that way. So everybody okay with that? Did that
Okay.
answer your question, Tony?
Yes, then Wednesday is just a regular meeting, right?
Wednesday's a regular council meeting.
Are we gonna
Okay.
meet here for a regular council meeting, or do you want us?
I
do you wanna
haven't,
Do it on Zoom.
I'll tell you what,
Just-
I haven't talked to, I didn't consider it. There's no reason why we couldn't. We could meet like this. And it is okay as a hybrid meeting. So obviously Zoom is there and applicants can come on Zoom to make, if there's a petition for X,
Sure.
it can happen that way.
Mr. Chairman, I may be able to get you some information through the League of Cities and Towns. I think many communities are doing a hybrid. Tony, you hearing the same thing? Yeah.
I had discussion with the assistant
Mhm.
solicitor today that had this part of it. And so I'll tell you, let me ask it this way. Does anybody object to meeting like this?
The only thing to consider is that folks may think, okay, oh, they're gonna be in the town hall, so I can come in. We may need to have some controls at the door,
Archie.
that's the only.
So
thing.
currently the door is locked. But that's a great point. And
But if we're here, I'm not so sure we can lock the door at that point. We would have to allow capacity up to the capacity.
up to
now.
15, I believe right now is
Right.
is current. That's a great point. I'll tell you what. I think it's worth the ask. I think it's worth, I find, and I think we all do, that this interaction is much more fluid.
Mhm.
And so no one has objection doing it? Okay, so I'll work with the administrator and the clerk and find out what the requirements are. Tony bring up a great point about if someone wanted to come in, could they? And I guess we'll have to figure out, we need, department head, if someone's weighing in on something, their access. So, all right, let's figure it out. If we can do it, then we'll have it here. And you'll have enough advance notice to make sure you can plan accordingly.
Great.
And if we can't, we'll just do it as we normally do.
Okay.
Is that all right with everyone?
Sounds good.
All right, can I have a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second.
All in favor?
All right.
Any opposed? Thanks, everyone. Thanks for all the hard work.
Thank you.